Vinesh forgot. She perhaps knew all the whys, whats, and hows of living her impossible life. How this story will impact culture and purpose narratives in the world.
In Bhutan, they remind themselves 5 times a day that they're going to die. And maybe like, well, that's kind of weird, Mike. Why are you bringing up death and trying to kind of move your impossible life forward?
I started one step at a time, all the way being told, no, 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 you cannot do that.
Purpose. In New Delhi, Vinesh Fogart was sleeping on the streets to protest against the sexual harassment faced by herself and many others. On social media, she could be seen beaten up to suppress her protest. Yet, she wanted to bring a change in her country and do something. Fast forward to Paris Olympics. Earlier this week, Fogart got disqualified in the gold medal match because she was found overweight by 1/4 of a pound. Guess what? 3 ounces on the day of the finals. She was even denied a silver medal despite her winning semifinals when she was perfectly fine. She perhaps knew all the whys, whats, and hows of living her impossible life. How this story will impact culture and purpose narratives in the world. I'll park this point here. Switching the gears a bit to another set of facts. Impossible to live my purpose. I know why I should, but I don't know how. It's a thing for the retirement. Does this sound familiar? 60% of the workforce feel detached at work these days. 20% are downright miserable. Yes, today we will explore these themes in the context of our current cultural environment. Friends, this is Lakshmi Kant, the host from Master G's Purpose DEI Lab. As usual, joining me is Azara Anna from Global Peace Media as a co-host. Azara, welcome. I'll be coming to you shortly for your thoughts on Fogart's story.
Okay.
But first, I'm very excited to introduce our special guest, Mike Kearney, a retired C-suite executive who has navigated the highs and lows of leadership and purpose. Mike spent 3 decades serving clients and having some of the coolest, fulfilling roles. Everything from being a chief marketing officer, starting a new business, and hosting a podcast. Although he had a dream job at a great company, he decided to pursue retirement early at the age of 50. He now dedicates his time to helping people dream, craft, and live their impossible life. Let's hear from Mike more about his story and how he helps put purpose into action. Mike, welcome.
Hey, Lakshmi, that was an incredible introduction. I have done hundreds of podcasts, and that may be one of the best ones that I've ever heard. And that story, wow, that is incredible. I need to probably do a little more due diligence on that one or read up on it, because that sounds like a story in resilience, which is near and dear to my heart. I was meeting with a prospective client the other day, and I was reminded of a quote from Jim Rohn that I think really gets at everything that I think about nowadays, and that is, "Don't die with the music still in you." And this is potentially maybe one of the most important questions I think one can ask. Are you living a life where you are at risk of dying with the music in you when you die? And we all have had those moments in our life that remind us that life is short. I've certainly had them. And, for whoever's listening, just pause for a second and just remember that moment when you were faced with death. Maybe it was, a grandparent passing away. Maybe it was something that happened to you. I've had 3 or 4 examples during my life that really kind of woke me up. My first was when my mom died when I was 20, probably the most impactful thing that I'd ever gone through. And while it certainly was not a good thing, it made me kind of who I am today. In 2005, I had a flight from Miami to San Francisco. I've talked about many times, but we had an engine fire. And it probably, quite frankly, was not that big of a deal at the end because the pilots were awesome. They could fly on one engine. But I thought I was going to die, so much so that I pulled out my BlackBerry. I was going to send my kids a message. And it really made me think, gosh, what if today was the last day? My son and I almost had we had a near drowning incident in 2017. And then the one that really kind of finally was the final wake up call. I was on another flight. I don't know what it is about Miami to San Francisco. I lived in San Francisco at the time. But I felt really sick. I was in the second row. I got up really quickly and I fainted. And it just made me think, am I living the life that I really should be living? And it really reminded me that life is truly short. And I think that we all owe it to ourselves to just pause and to think about, are we living the life that we want? The positioning I use is impossible life. I like the word impossible, quite frankly. I think nothing is impossible. I think it's oftentimes the constraints that we put around it. What are the rules that I want to live by? For example, one that I came up with is live minimally, which was, quite frankly, critical to me getting to where I am today. Think about the buckets that were critical to achieving this life, this impossible life that I talk about. And that's things like work, family, your core relationship with your partner, finances, spirituality, God, whatever it may be, that is important for you to achieve that impossible life. What is your vision for each of those buckets? And then where are you today? Which was sobering because I had these grandiose visions, but I wasn't even close. But it helped me because it forced me to think about that gap and to start to work it. And so I really started working. A lot of times people put together great goals or life plans or whatever, and then they throw it away. I didn't do that. I lived religiously by this thing. I would look at it every single day to make sure that I was focused on the right things. I would spend an hour every Sunday planning my week, which oftentimes obviously required me to do my work at Deloitte, but it made me focus on the things that were really true to who I was and was congruent with that impossible life. I would schedule a day, and I know this may not sound like a lot, but I would schedule a full day once a quarter. I'd go off site. Oftentimes it was our public library in Walnut Creek, California, and I would go deep on my plan. I would ask myself, where am I falling down? What have I done well? What has changed in my plan? And I would calendarize my entire year, focusing on the things that were kind of important but not urgent. And so it allowed me to do things like I need to take a 1 week vacation with my wife every year. That was one of the things that I had put in my plan. So I made sure it happened. And it changed my life. It changed my life in the long term because my impossible life, my long-term impossible life is I want freedom in my 50s. And it required me obviously to do a lot of things over that decade, saving, living minimally and things like that. But I achieved that. So I retired when I was literally 50 in 5 months, I think. But then short term, it pushed me to accept who I truly was in my profession. And back in 2012, I would say I was kind of an oddball. I was a 7-year partner, like I said, but I was always doing things that were painting outside of the lines, maybe taking risks, not doing what the standard partner at Deloitte did or kind of how they operated or looked like or all that good stuff. And I think there was always a bit of like imposter syndrome. But when I started to go deep, I was like, no, this is who I am, and I'm going to double down on it. And I think it's what allowed me really to progress in my career, because once I owned it, all of these other opportunities started to come to fruition. And Lakshmi, you kind of went over a few of the cool roles, I call them, but I got to do some of the most incredible stuff. But it would not have happened if I wasn't intentional about my life and I didn't go deep.
I find this whole topic of the impossible dream, the impossible life, completely relevant to my life, because anybody looking at my background would say, how in the world are you doing what you're doing now? Because, as I said before, I come not from this country, was born in a small little town in southern Sicily, only 200 people there. I didn't know anything else existed in the world, certainly knew nothing about America, did not speak the English language. And suddenly at the age of 8, I was transferred by my parents to this East Coast, the most diverse community in the world, probably. And all of a sudden, oh my God, here I am, the entire world opened up to me. So that was sort of my first awakening that there is something beyond my kind of structure of family and friends and whatever I had experienced as a child. And then that was great, but the challenges started immediately. People said, oh, you know, you're in a small little town, there's no bilingual education. They didn't put me back in the first grade, they threw me in whatever it was, third grade. It was already the end of October, school year had started, no special help, no tutoring, no nothing. And there I was, a small child, you know, expected to just hear and understand what, you know, what the Catholic nuns in that school were saying. And people said to me, oh, you'll never make it out of this grade, you'll never learn English. The little kids would always be laughing. And in my little child's mind, I said to myself, Azara, these people are laughing at you because you cannot speak the language. So here's your first task. You need to learn to speak this language, not only as well as they are speaking, but even better. And that's what I proceeded to do. I didn't have any plan on how I was going to do that, but I knew that somehow listening to the tone of the language by way of radio and that small black and white TV in those days would probably help me. I don't know where that thought came from, but that's what I did. You know, almost all of my spare time was trying to listen to that intonation of the English language. And I was able literally to get past that grade and then go on and then immerse myself in books and everything else. So that challenge of learning the language and learning this culture was met. But then I went on to, you know, get scholarships to the university. And people said, well, what do you want to do? I said, well, I want to be in broadcast media and communication. Oh, that's such a hard place to go. You know, you'll never get anywhere, blah, blah, blah. And sure enough, the doors opened in that broadcast field because I was at New York University communications film department. And when you're there, it's kind of an elitist setting. And so doors are open to you. My problem became, as I've said it before, I got through the door easily. I didn't like what was on the other side. Well, that's great. Because if you don't like what's on the other side of sort of the mainstream media, you're leaving all that security, stability, financial, etc. behind. Now, what do? Those are the major challenges, you know, how to find my purpose and my passion in what I wanted to do. And literally, Mike and Lakshmi, I started one step at a time, all the way being told, no, 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 you cannot do that. So the challenges, at least a basic challenge I see here for people in this society where people are depressed in their work, as Lakshmi said, and then over 70% of people are depressed in general about their lives and on medications. How do they get from that phase into trying to think about what is my purpose, what is my passion in life when I am living paycheck to paycheck?
Yeah. And deep inside, I think they know it and they are not ready to take action. And that's where we are getting Mike's thoughts on how to do it, right? Considering the fear of what's at stake for them. I think all we need is to tweak how we think. And if I just add my story to it, one of the stories, when I started my first corporate job as an accountant, my supervisor often referred to me as a professor. At that time, I didn't understand the compliment, and it actually made me uncomfortable. You know, however, my perspective changed when I moved to the United States and began facilitating training sessions. I mean, you would wonder what a teacher would do at a corporate or a big four, right? I started facilitating trainings, and my passion for teaching soon came to light. It wasn't long before I remember interaction with the president of the professional institution in India. He was sitting at my home here in New Jersey, and he asked me to help design their curriculum. And we are talking about all India level institution. And this recognition was a turning point, you know, leading me to visit over 250 universities worldwide. And I think, Mike, you and I talked that my passion about visiting schools and all, and some of my happiest moments, embracing my passion for teaching, right? Writing. I transitioned from a number game to becoming a thought leader in my field and authoring books, point of views, articles. And here I am, you know, hosting a podcast with you.
I love that. I think it's interesting because when I left Deloitte, I was like, well, what am I going to do? And so I started coaching. I got certified in coaching. I launched another podcast, Time to Sing Your Song. I even actually started a new brand about the powers of being outside. But More recently, I had this like eureka moment where I was like, well, you know what? If I could craft this life plan and basically create this wonderful, impossible life that I'm leading, maybe I could teach other people. And so back in December, I put out a message on LinkedIn and I said, hey, I'm looking for an initial cohort of people that would like to go through this process. And I think this is going to answer the question of kind of how you do this. And so I went through and kind of trained everybody up on the program, like how to actually come up with your impossible life plan. And then what are the steps you could do to start living it? And I now host a monthly meeting. We call it the Fight Club, where everybody shares an update. They talk about successes they've had, challenges, where they may need help. It's amazing. But here's my big aha, my eureka moment. And I think I've known this all along, but it's powerful because I've seen it with my coaching clients, I've seen it with me, and now I see it with this cohort of 18. And that is, it's not that difficult to come up with your why, your deeper why, your purpose, the things that give you joy and fulfillment, the thing that you want to do. And not to suggest that that can't change over time, but people will have it usually in, their heart or their gut. And if they don't, they can be coached or advised, or you can run some exercises to help them get there. And actually, ironically, I always just think, well, that's kind of anti Simon Sinek, like, oh, this is easy. But I was just listening to a podcast with him on, who was it? Danica Patrick, who's the old race car driver. And he said the exact same thing. Like, people can come up with their why fairly easily. The challenge is the how. And I can tell you, with all of the people I coach and the people that I work with, they have an incredible, impossible future. But there are a lot of things that get in the way. It could be procrastination. It could be a fixed mindset. It could be that they don't have the energy once they worked a full day. It could be maybe they're hanging with the wrong people. But there are so many different things that get in the way. And so this has led me to, if you're asking me like, Mike, what are you most excited about today? It is really starting to decompose the things that people can do in order to solve that how. And not all of the areas would be applicable to everybody, but a lot of them would be. And so I call them my fight tactics. So I've really kind of branded a lot of the stuff that I've done around impossible life, and you need to fight for your life. And so these are the tactics that you should execute or could execute in order to achieve that impossible life and really solve for that how. Let me give you just a couple examples. We all have times where we have these goals and then we fall down. And let me just use an example. Say if you're like, I want to create an incredible brand and I'm going to post one thing that is interesting and unique on LinkedIn every single day. And then you have a really tough week and maybe you don't post for a couple days. What typically happens? Well, you stop. And then, maybe a month or two later, you go, gosh, I had that goal and I was doing well until I wasn't. And so the first tactic is to double down the day after a setback. And what that means is if for some reason you don't post the next day, you are going to create the very best post that you've ever put together because this is such an important thing. But having the mindset that a setback is not a bad thing. It happens to all of us, but you need to re-engage and you need to re-engage quickly. The second one is to find the action that makes other priorities easier to get done. And what I've started to find through a lot of my clients' plans was that there was one thing, and if they just did that one thing well, it opened up all of the other things or many of the other priorities. Here's one that I think I've seen for myself. If I get great sleep, I probably did 3x the next day. But when I got poor sleep, and this is literally for me right now, when I get poor sleep, I'm not motivated to write. I'm not motivated to go out and find more clients. I'm not motivated to go to the gym. I'm not motivated to potentially spend time with my family. I'm just not that productive. And so I found that if I prioritize sleep above everything else, all of the other things are much easier to do. And then the last one maybe is my most favorite. In Bhutan, they remind themselves 5 times a day that they're going to die. And maybe like, well, that's kind of weird, Mike. Why are you bringing up death and trying to kind of move your impossible life forward? Well, what they've also found is that when they have a perspective of death, it really motivates them to do the things that they need to do and to live the life that they want. And so I'm a big believer, and I do this all the time, 5 times a day I try, where I just pause and I say, my life is finite. I'm 52 years old. I'm way past 50% of my life. I need to live my life now. And it then motivates me to do these things that give me great joy and fulfillment. And so those are three examples, but really what I'm most excited about and really looking to make a big impact, hopefully in this world, like maybe this becomes a book someday. For now, it's going to be tools that I use with my clients, but is really helping people solve for this how. And I think I've got, like I said, about 75 of these tactics.
Yeah.
The one area where people, when they're talking about finding their purpose and passion in life, seem to get stuck, at least in the conversations that people have had with me, is how do they get past the fear? How do they get past the fear of leaving behind what it is that's brought them security, whether it's financial security or relationship security, whatever it is? Like, how do you teach your clients to move past this gripping fear that will stop them from moving forward?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. First of all, I don't think there's a magical answer around how you get people past a fear, at least in terms of how they think or feel about it. I'm a big believer, and it's funny because I went through this coaching program, and they had a model which said if you change your thoughts, you'll change how you feel, which will change your actions, right? I totally disagree with that, in my opinion, or my experience. I think if you act, if you do something, the mere process of doing something different will likely change how you feel, your physiological makeup, which will then change how you think. And so what I guide my clients on a lot, like let's just take an example. I've got a client right now. He wants to get into corporate real estate and he's scared of it. I had dinner with him a couple of weeks ago and I said, I'm not going to say his name, but John Doe, how are you progressing on that? Well, I don't know what to do. I'm doing some research. He was playing it safe. And I said, well, let's talk about some low risk actions that you can take this week that will be pretty easy and that you can execute really without any risk. Okay, let's talk about that. Well, do you know anybody in corporate real estate? Not really. Have you asked any of your friends and family as to whether or not they know anybody that they could introduce you to? Not really. I said, well, here, I've got, ironically, my daughter is dating a guy that's in corporate real estate. I'll put you in contact with them. So I'm putting you in contact with them. Let's go find some other people. So you can have these low risk conversations in order to better understand it. Okay, now where do you go from there? Well, opportunities may arise. He may find out that he actually doesn't even really want to do it because now he learns a little more. But I think people get stymied and they just sit and they swirl in their head and they don't take that action. So for me, the most important thing, whatever it is, whether it's health, relationships, work, taking a big risk, it's always starting with an action that they're comfortable with and then taking a bigger action and continuing to move. And so actually one of my fight tactics is act, evaluate, and modify. And I think if people were just to do that, like have an open mind, do something, evaluate how it goes, and then actually, the last word's pivot, and then pivot. So that would be my answer is action is so critical to moving forward. And quite frankly, Azara, think about your story. Like, oh, I came to the United States, I did speak. Well, you didn't sit around thinking about, oh my God, why do people not like me or why are they making fun of me? You're like, no, I'm just going to start to learn the language.
Yes. And it's been challenge after challenge ever since. But, today here I am, at a global peace media organization that I founded, and I'm speaking with people all over the world and having these kinds of similar conversations on any given day, because most people, not just in this country, but other countries, are stuck in whatever situation they're stuck in. They don't like it. They don't know how to get out of it. And of course, some cultures, it's easier for us in the US maybe to get out of a situation we're not comfortable with and don't like than in some other parts of the world. So that is why I asked that question about fear. And added to that is the changing landscape, economic and cultural landscape, where AI is dominating everything. So, how do we move forward in this kind of uncertain world with the thought, oh, where is my purpose and passion, when they don't even have a landing pad underneath their feet, given all the chaos around them? That's what I hear from people.
Pivoting back to Fogart's story, how I started, sometimes we need to think beyond our goals and dreams. Her dream was to win a medal for the country in Olympics, but I like to believe that she achieved much bigger. Today she left International Olympic Committee to think about the rules and how come she was denied a medal. The whole country, India, many athletes from the Olympics, they are rallying behind her. People got arrested back home who were allegedly doing sexual harassment. The world leaders are tweeting for her. We are talking about billion plus people thinking about her. She doesn't have a gold or silver in her under her belt, but I think she has won the gold. She has won the hearts of many, many.
Yes. And she
You
will
know,
be an
it's
inspiration to many, many, many other people around the world, because that's what it takes. If people are stuck and paralyzed in fear, if they can just look to an example of someone else who is facing even worse challenges than they are, well, then that may encourage them to move forward. That's why I think all of us here on this program are doing what we're doing to get the messages out so people can start to live their impossible life in some fashion or way.
I was curious because we're talking about her. There are 329 medal events. I just Googled this while we were talking.
Yeah.
And I'm not suggesting that somebody that won a gold medal is not somebody worthy of sharing their story, but she's got a much different story. And I actually believe when I look at my life, and I've said this many times, and I've never been able to figure out an example, but I have never grown into a better person during the good times. Never, ever. I always grow when I got knocked on my ass. And what's interesting about this is my gut instinct tells me that she's going to probably find something that is way more powerful in this story and an impact that she can make on this earth. I think what's most important, though, is when people get knocked down, they don't oftentimes think about it in a moment. It usually takes some time for them to figure out kind of what is the good in this. And one of the things that I've begun to train myself in, and I've had some tough times, especially over the last few years from a family perspective, I try to ask myself in the moment when things are the worst, what can I take away from this? And how can this make me a better human being? And that just totally reframes the entire conversation from woe was me to like, how am I going to be a better person and what impact can I make as a result of this?
Wonderful.
Totally agree.
Love that. Mike, Zara, any final thoughts?
I'll leave it to Mike to go first.
So here's what I would say. I mean, I think you guys probably are on to the fact that this whole notion of how is important to me. And I would say for whoever is out there, and my guess is every single listener is probably like, there is something in my gut that I know will give me greater joy and fulfillment than where I am at today. I would say, don't let that song die. And there are things that you can do. And if you can't figure out the steps that you should take, go talk to somebody that's a mentor. And the last thing I'll say is you may be sometimes like apprehensive to reach out to somebody that maybe, has a big title or you don't think they will give you the time of day. There is nothing to lose for you just to say, hey, I really respect you. You've done some wonderful things in your life. Can I get 10 minutes of your time? And if they say no, that's okay. Just move on to the next person. But I think if you do that enough, especially early on in your life and your career, you're going to find enough people that will open your eyes to the possibilities of that life that you want to live.
Very well said, Mike. I would like to encourage the parents and other listeners out there, because it all starts as children in the house and what you're taught by your parents. So if your parents can teach you as a child that you have worth, you have value, and that you should pursue your passion and purpose in life, regardless of what society is saying, oh, well, you should be this, that, and the other, because that will give you economic stability or any other kind of stability. No, you will not be a happy person. And a happy person cannot really contribute to the betterment of humanity. So that's what I would like to leave the audience with.
Yeah. And thank you, Mike and Azara, for your great insights and thoughts. Mike, we can't thank you enough for being our guest. I think our audience will love your insights into the hows and whys of purpose. And we look forward to having continuing this conversation with you.